Nicodemus here, and on today's episode, I wanted to start by reading Matthew 7:3. Why do you look at the speck of sawdust in your brother's eye and pay no attention to the plank in your own eye? How can you say to your brother, let me take the speck out of your eye, when all the time there is a plank in your own eye? You hypocrite, first take the plank out of your own eye, and then you will see clearly to remove the speck from your brother's eye. Can you relate that to the Course?
Yeah, there's a lot of parts in the Course that actually are relatable to this, and I think of one of them that Jesus says in the Course is that if you're looking at the ego in your brother or sister, you must be looking through your own. He's like, he also says to us very specifically, he says, vigilance to the ego in others is not the type of vigilance the Holy Spirit would have us maintain, right? And this is one of the traps of spirituality, because as we go deeper into it, the trap is that I now know you don't, or you're it almost sets us up like we're in a hierarchy where we're at a higher place to judge the other. That's what Jesus is saying in Matthew, that not seeing the plank in our own eye, it is hypocritical, because whatever we see in another, if they're operating from the ego, it's not up to us to correct them. And it's actually up to us, like the sole responsibility of the miracle workers, to accept the atonement, the healing for themselves. So it brings to mind this concept in the Course called the Unhealed Healer, that Jesus is very adamant in the Course, and really I feel like in the Bible as well, is that you must accept the healing for yourself. Without that, first off, we're in no position to judge anyway. But if we don't accept the healing for ourselves, what the subtle trap is that I'll place myself above the other person that I'm judging, and I'll think that I'm healed. And what Jesus is saying is that that's not healing. And I want to read this from the Unhealed Healer. It's in chapter 9, section 5, paragraph 6. And he's going on. He's talking a little bit about psychotherapy. And now, if you're new to the Course, just realize that Helen was a psychotherapist. So a lot of the way Jesus spoke to Helen was about the therapist and patient relationship, let's say. But you can replace that with any type of, quote, healer in today's day and age. And I want to say this, and this is not a judgment, if you will, on healers and people out there, because actually everybody's doing the best that they can. And if anyone's in a situation where they're a coach or a therapist or a healer or whatever it is, they have to understand where true healing occurs. And it can't come through analysis. It can't come through like, I know more than you, and you just have to learn this. And when you learn this, then you'll be at my level, and then you'll finally be healed. And that's where the Unhealed Healer comes in. And he says, what then should happen? When God said, quote, let there be light, as it says in Genesis, there was light, and was is italicized. He said, can you find light by analyzing darkness as the psychotherapist does? Or like the theologian, by acknowledging darkness in yourself and looking for a distant light to remove it while emphasizing the distance? Think about that for a moment. Because, I mean, in some ways, Helen's a therapist, a psychotherapist. So you can just imagine, for Helen, Jesus come and say, like, that's what you're doing, and that's why you ultimately don't know the real cause of healing and the real source of healing. Because if you did, your life would be healed, your relationships would be healed. Conflict wouldn't have been showing up in the department for Helen and Bill. They were the department at Columbia University. And all of this came out of that conflict. So what Jesus is saying is that the psychotherapist analyzes the darkness, agrees that the darkness is there. Let's talk about the darkness and all that. What he's saying now, he's also lovingly calling out the theologian that's saying, acknowledging darkness in yourself, that there's darkness in us first, and then a distant light to remove it, while emphasizing the distance, like God or the Holy Spirit's really far away. I'm a miserable sinner. I hope that they could come in and transform me. Now, I understand that might go against some parts of the Bible, where people are like, well, we are miserable sinners and all this. Well, Jesus says in the Course is that really the New Testament is the gospel of love. And it's about loving ourself and loving our neighbor as ourself. It comes together. So if we go on, he says, healing is not mysterious. Nothing will change unless it is understood, since light is understanding. And then he goes on. And now you could replace this with any type of teacher, healer, therapist. He says, a therapist does not heal. He lets healing be. So think about that for a moment. And that's italicized. A therapist does not heal. He lets healing be. That was probably, Ruth, I would imagine, a struggle for Helen. Although she had great relationships with some of her patients over time, I had transformations. Obviously, while she was scribing the course, she was going deeper into herself and her own forgiveness. So a therapist does not heal; he lets healing be. He can point to darkness, but he cannot bring light of himself, for light is not of him, yet being for him. Light is for both the therapist and the patient. So it's for all of us. It's not like the teacher has got the light and you don't. See, once that's set up, I learned a lot from India and a lot of the gurus and teachers, and really the great ones would say that there's no difference between you and them. Some of them got caught in the exoneration of the teacher, which the ego finds its way in, because if you ever go in front of a teacher or you're learning from someone where they make it feel like they're up here and you're down here, I say this lovingly, run, because it sets up a role where they can be the unhealed healer. And the unhealed healer wants gratitude from their students or the people around them, but doesn't realize how important the student is just as important as the teacher. So the moment it's set up where the teacher thinks they're above the student or the therapist above the patient, it's now the unhealed healer scenario set up. Because he goes on, he says, the Holy Spirit is the only therapist. That's the thing, is what Jesus says throughout, the Holy Spirit's the only comforter, the only healer, the only therapist. He makes healing clear in any situation which he is the guide. You can only let him fulfill his function. He needs no help for this. He will tell you exactly what to do to help anyone he sends to you for help, and will speak to him through you if you do not interfere. See, if the log is in your eye, you're going to interfere with what the Holy Spirit guides us to do. And that's what Jesus is saying in Matthew, is that the moment you have to take the log out of your own eye, because what that does is it traps us in the unhealed healer, and it becomes too tempting to judge my brother or sister as though I don't see the log in my own eye. It's not there. I'll just point out what's going on with you. And then I'm ultimately now lost as well. And the Holy Spirit is the only one in the end that ever does the healing and the teaching. So if I could surrender to the Holy Spirit, he says, remember that you choose the guide for helping. It's either going to be the Holy Spirit or the ego. And the wrong choice will not help. But remember also that the right one will. Trust him, for help is his function, and he is of God. As you awaken other minds to the Holy Spirit through him, and not yourself. That's the key. And that's what all the unhealed healers, we all need to learn this, because the healing does not come from us. Actually, when we can get ourselves out of the way. Now, what does that look like in your own life? Let me finish reading this here. It says, as you awaken other minds to the Holy Spirit through him and not of yourself, you will understand that you are not obeying the laws of this world, but the laws you are obeying work, and they do. The good is what works, quote, end quote, is a sound though insufficient statement. Only the good can work. Nothing else works at all. So think about what Jesus is saying is in Matthew, when we stop judging others, when we seek to take the log out of our own eye and heal, we can now be a channel for the Holy Spirit to heal others, which we don't do the healing. And that's what Jesus learned. We don't do the healing. All of it comes from the Father. It comes from the Holy Spirit. And Jesus, even in the New Testament, says that everything I do, you will do in greater. So he's really urging us to take the log out of our own eye and wake up, not to be hypocritical while judging others while we have the log in our own eye. We have to actually accept the healing for ourselves first, and then as we clear that, the Holy Spirit guides us in each area of our life. And I can't, you get to practice this and try it. It can't be given to someone. It really is earned through our surrender, through our faith. And when you do that, you'll see that you'll be guided very specifically in every area of your life, whatever's troubling you. When we seek to take the log out of our own eye and we realize we're not miserable sinners, have we made errors and mistakes? Absolutely. And we're like little children, really, that need to learn now. So for us, it's to cultivate that willingness to see it differently. And it really starts with seeing ourselves differently and recognizing the log in our own eye, how we've really sought to play out darkness and conflict in our life. And that when we want to see something different, it'll be given to us. So you get to practice this and try this in your own life. Really look at the areas of your life that you could start to really let go of judgment and be guided to your own healing, and then extend that out to the healing of others and ultimately to the world.